if you can all see my screen. Yes.
Yes.
All right. I can see that you have all, okay, you have muted your mics. Okay, great. So what you're going to be talking today is about what you should consider when teaching vocabulary. Some of the ideas and the principles that I'm about to share with you here, they were taken from an article that I can share with you later, where Schmidt is a very famous writer in the context of vocabulary teaching, and he talks about some of the principles that you should keep in mind as we teach vocabulary. So we're going to have time today for so I tried to be very selective and choose the most important ones. And not only the I think somebody has their mic on. Let me see if I can. Okay, thank you. So not only the theoretical ones are very important, but what I tried to do here was to strike a balance between theory and practice. So you're going to see that most of these ideas are also very practical, things that you can implement easily in your lessons. So the first tip we're going to be talking about, tip or principle, is more classroom time should be dedicated to vocabulary teaching. Don't know if you agree with me, but those of us who use course books, normally when you look at the syllabus of a course book, we notice that, and by the way, this is not a criticism, it's just an observation. When you look at the syllabus of a course book, we often see that it's very grammar oriented. So unit 1 is going to be about the present simple and then past continuous and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of emphasis on grammar. As we know, people who write course books, I'm talking about course book writers here, sometimes they have to make decisions. They have to prioritize. And they have a number of pages that they have to include. So for example, if you compare a typical course book that we have today, you're going to notice that it has far fewer pages than a course book from 30 years ago. I collect course books, but I promise you I'm not crazy. And I have course books here from 1986, 1978, and there are course books with more than 300 pages, almost 400 pages. Nowadays, when you look at course books, we see that they're much shorter, 170, 108, some of them have 200 and something, including like all the extra material. And the problem is, so course book writers have to prioritize, they have to make decisions. Then, again, I'm going to be making a generalization here, but I think it's going to resonate with your experience. When you look at a typical course book lesson, you see that there is emphasis on skills. So reading skills, reading, listening, speaking, writing, not so much. They try to teach grammar, they try to teach vocabulary. So in my experience, vocabulary is often neglected. So you have some vocabulary from the text, and then like one or two exercises, and that's it. So I always find myself supplementing the course books that I use. So then I can provide students with more opportunities to practice the vocabulary that the course book introduces, or the vocabulary, for example, that I try to bring into my lessons. So that's our first principle here. We need more classroom time dedicated to vocabulary teaching. And a very good reason for this is this writer here, Bartira Laufer, she says that when you look at students' performance in reading skills, I believe that most of us here, when we're going to teach a reading skills lesson, we have what's called a pre-reading stage, right? Where we prepare students to read the text, and then a while reading stage, and then a post-reading stage. Again, most of the time, course books focus a lot on reading for gist and reading for detail. And we hope that by providing students with these opportunities to read the text for gist and for detail, they're going to develop their reading skills. The problem is, she says that by far the greatest lexical obstacle to good reading is insufficient number of words in the learner's lexicon. Now, think about the implications of this. We're always doing pretty much the same thing, right? Pre-reading stage, while reading stage, post-reading stage. In the pre-reading stage, we try to activate previous knowledge, schemata, so all the things you know. But if they don't have enough vocabulary to understand the text, they're really going to struggle with it. Why? Because one of the things we're going to see later today is that students are very bad at guessing words from context. And that's not my opinion. Research says that. When you ask students to look at the text and try to infer the meaning of unknown words, they don't do very well. So if we're just focusing on, and I'm not saying that these are bad. Of course they have their place. What I'm saying is if we just focus on reading skills such as reading for gist, reading for detail, hoping that magically students are going to improve, even if they have a poor vocabulary, this is going to be tough. So a good vocabulary is essential so they can read and understand texts. And then she says that in research studies, Lexis was found to be not one of the important factors, but the best predictor of success in reading, better than syntax or general reading ability. So that's the first point. We need more time to teach vocabulary because vocabulary has an impact not only on students' production, but also on receptive skills, such as reading. The author I mentioned earlier on, Schmidt, he says that to listen to, like, everyday conversational English, students will need to have something from the region of 6,000 to 7,000 word families. You see, he's not talking about isolated words, but word families. Now, what do I mean by word families? You know the verb use. Okay, so that's one word. But out of use, we can make other words, right? Reuse, useful, useless. So that's word families. And then he says here that everyday conversations from 6,000 to 7,000 word families. We're talking about a lot of words here, right? So students can feel comfortable. To watch films aimed at children, and he gives us an example, Shrek, around 7,000 word families. I'm sorry, I think someone has their mic on. All right, thank you. So watch films aimed at kids, around 7,000 word families. Also, like, lots of words. And to read a range of novels, which is much more challenging, for example, than watch a movie that's aimed at kids, from 8,000 to 9,000 word families. The bottom line is students need to learn a lot of words so that we can have a very good understanding of the English language in different contexts. Now, let's think about our context here. Would you say, let me see the chat. Would you say that it's fair to assume that most of our students study English, have classes, right? Let's focus on the classes they have. 2 hours per week. Or do most of your students have 1 hour per week? Not even 2. 1. I can see some people showing one finger, 1, 2. So between 1 or 2 lessons per week. Okay. I'm not talking about how much time they study outside the classroom, but the number of classes they have per week. So 1 or 2. Well, I can see here in the chat, usually 2. Rima, 4 hours. Oh, they're lucky. Okay, so 1 or 2 hours. Let's consider 2 here, just for the sake of argument. If they have 2 hours per week, so by the end of the year, they're going to have studied something like 80 hours per year, right? 2 hours per week times the number of weeks we have, so 8 hours per year. Let's say that they're very lucky. I don't think this is likely to happen, but let's say they're very lucky to learn 10 new words per lesson. So every time you teach them a lesson, they learn 10 new words. Some of you are laughing, right? Okay, it's just for the sake of argument, just to make a point, 10 new words per lesson. So by the end of the year, they will have learned, or maybe I should say they'll have been exposed, because learning is something, being exposed or something, exposed is something else. So to 800 words per year. Now, if they just rely on your, even if you were able to, let's consider this, even if you were able to teach them 10 new words per lesson, and assuming that they're going to remember the new words, by the end of the year, they will have learned 800 words. So how long is going to take them is going to take for them to learn 8,000 words or 7,000 word families? Something like 8 years. So clearly, I think there's one point here that we all agree. Students cannot depend only on our classes to learn new words. Because if they are to depend only on our classes to learn new words, it's going to take them forever to improve their vocabulary because they have like 1 or 2 hours per week. So clearly, they must find a ways to keep exposing themselves to English. We know all the blah, 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 right? To keep exposing themselves to English outside the classroom and learning new words. Because if they don't do that, if they only rely on the classes they have, well, it's not going to cut it. Do you all agree? Does it make sense to you? Yeah, because I mean, again, right? When we consider, let me see the chat. When we consider the number of words that Schmidt talks about that we need to learn so that we can, let's say, perform in different situations with the number of classes they have. So naturally, they need to go beyond what we teach outside the classroom. Now, this leads us to the following conclusion regarding the first tip, right? A lot of vocabulary should be taught and reviewed. Because if we're talking about humans, not robots, they're not just going to see a word once and memorize it. They're going to need multiple encounters with a word or an expression so they can really incorporate that word. This leads us to the second principle. Once is never enough. So I have seen a lot of teachers, and even in like Brastiso events, people talking about how many encounters or how many times you have to see a word so you can memorize it. You may have heard it, right? Are you familiar with any number, like X number of times you have to see a word so you can memorize it? Let me see the chat. 16, 8, 5 to 10. Okay. 10 to 12, I've heard 7. Yes, Jerusa, I have also heard 7, 7, 8 times. What research shows is that this is by an author named Uchihara, and she says that the number of encounters necessary to learn words ranges from 6, 10, 12 to more than 20 times. Which is to say, it's basically impossible to say that for you to learn a word, you need this number of times because it varies significantly. She even makes the point, I'll be sharing all the references with you later, that the number of encounters necessary for learning vocabulary to occur during meaning-focused input remains unclear. What does she mean by meaning-focused input? So when you have an activity, for example, that students are going to be exposed to new language, to new words. Okay, so it's not an exercise for them. You know those controlled practice activities that sometimes we use? So in this activity, you have to use the present perfect or the past simple because this is what we have taught in that lesson. So we have an activity that students can use like any language at their disposal. The idea is to focus on meaning, and then they're going to be exposed to new words. So how many times in a like real communicative situation do they have to encounter the word in order to memorize it? It's unclear, she says. We can't tell if it's 6, if it's 10, because it depends. Has ever happened to you? It has happened to me many times. Sometimes you see a word once, but you created a connection, like maybe an emotional or psychological connection with that word, that the first time you have seen it, you memorize it immediately. And some words you have to see twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and for some reason you can't remember the goddamn word. Yeah, so it makes sense, right? It makes sense when she says that it's very hard to tell the number of times we need. But one thing is for sure, for most words, we need to have multiple encounters. Then this leads us to something that's very difficult to do in the classroom because we're always, time, as the movie Matrix says, time is always against us. We have to cover way too many things. But providing opportunities for students to recycle the vocabulary we taught is very important. How can we do that? For this webinar, I put together here 5 strategies that are very simple to use, so they're not going to take a lot of time. That's the most important thing, right? Not time consuming, because we don't have much time. So they're very easy to use, but very effective. The first one of them is called direct recall. So basically the idea here is to like explicitly ask questions to see if students can remember the words they've learned. For example, let's say that you have taught some lexical items, and then by the end of the lesson, you ask the students, what was the word we learned that means a feeling of great happiness? So I'm providing the definition. And then hopefully they're going to tell you the word you've taught. Maybe it was, I don't know, elated or delighted. Or letter B, can anyone remember the adjective we used to describe something very old? Let's say that in that lesson you taught the word ancient. And you want to check if they remember this word. So direct recall is when you explicitly ask about the words that have been taught. Does it make sense? Very easy, very simple, is to get students to like try to retrieve the new words. The second strategy I believe you can see it now, is a gap fill exercise. So by the end of the lesson, you can write some sentences with the words that are, with some words missing, and the words that are missing are the ones they have learned in that particular lesson. So take this one, for instance, the sun, below the horizon, signaling the end of the day. You can even provide them with a clue like opposite of rise, and then see if they can remember, not only remember the word, but you're also providing like context, right? For them to think about how the word can be used. Or letter B, after hours of negotiation, they finally reached a, and if it's too hard, you can provide a hint, a mutual agreement or contract. The idea is just like the first one, but instead of asking an explicit question about the words you've taught, you provide them with an activity so they can have a context and think about how they could complete with the new words. So far, so good. Before we get into number 3, let me ask you a question. If you consider the first two, the direct recall, which is more explicit, and the gap fill, is it something you have already used to help students recycle? Yeah. Which one of those two do you use more often? Direct recall or like gap fills? Direct recall. Uh-huh. Gap fill. Okay. In the session, generally gap fills. Right. Number 3 is very similar to direct recall, but instead of asking students to come up with the word based on a definition, you give them like a synonym or an antonym. For instance, what is another word for happy that we discussed today? And maybe the word was, again, thrilled, delighted, elated, exhilarating, or something like this. Which word from our lesson contrasts with transparent? So hoping that by providing them with the synonym or the antonym, they're going to come up with the word that you have taught. The point here is to show you that when it comes to recycling, there are many strategies we can use, right? We can vary, don't always have to use the same ones. So using synonyms, using antonyms, use gap fills, asking explicitly. Number 4 is a little bit more productive in the sense that not only are we going to be asking students to like getting them to remember the word, but trying them to use it. So for instance, can you use the word in that lesson you taught the word meticulous? Can you use the word meticulous in a sentence? And then see if they can come up with something new using the new word or expression. Or you can even be more specific. You can provide them with the word and the context. Use, let's say, you've taught the word innovate in a sentence, but talking about technology. This is a nice one because, as I said, you're not just getting them to remember, but you're providing the opportunity for them to try and use it. And you can also give, in case The other day, a teacher asked me, okay, but what if the student comes up with a sentence that's incorrect? Well, no problem, right? We keep saying that mistakes are part of the process. So if they use it in a sentence that's wrong, we help them like rephrase and refine the sentence. It's very common actually, because maybe they can come up with a new sentence and use the word in a way that sounds, let's say, unnatural. And then you can tell them, okay, your sentence makes sense, but if you make this adjustment, it's going to sound even better. Like, especially if we're talking about collocations, right? Sometimes students combine words in a way that doesn't sound very natural. And the last tip is focused 100% on collocations, because we're not just focusing on the word we have taught, but we're also focusing on the words that combine with it. For example, they have seen the word responsibility, like it's a basic level lesson. What verb goes with, like combines with responsibility? I mean, hoping they're going to say take, right? To take responsibility. Or what noun or word frequently follows the verb pay when you talk about attention? So you ask questions. Did I say now, or should it be preposition? Yeah, I think that I got this one wrong. What preposition frequently follows the verb pay? We're talking about attention. You pay attention to something. So you can ask questions here that are going to get students to focus on the new words and also the words that frequently accompany this new word or expression. The important thing is to consider that, number one, recycling is super important. Number two, we don't have much time to reinvent the wheel. So how can we do this in a way that's going to be like very straight to the point? It's not going to be time consuming, and it's going to help students remember what they've learned. Let me see the chat here. Okay. Right. So if you have questions, again, feel free to share. Anna is keeping an eye on the chat. Marianne is saying in our Norwegian public schools, we have, the words of the week. The words are taught in context, and 2 sentences. Nice. Word of the week. Sounds cool. Can we move on to number 3? Number 3 is especially, let's say, pertinent to more advanced students, because normally when students reach an upper intermediate level of proficiency or a more advanced level, they have in mind that they're only learning new words if they are like obscure, very difficult words, which is not true. We know that it's not true. Because learning more vocabulary is not just learning new words. And I'd like to make an experiment with you here. Can everybody see 6 sentences on the screen? Yep. Can you please take a few seconds for you to read the sentences, see if you can complete with the word that's missing? Was it enough time for you to make a decision? Okay, before you write it in the chat, do you have the same word for all gaps? Is it the same verb? Yes, yes, yes. It should be the same. Of course, you're going to be changing the word grammatically, but it should be the same. Can you please write in the chat the word you've come up with? That was fast. Make. Yes, you got it. I should have chosen something more challenging, right? You're so outstanding that, it was too easy. So you have made significant inroads, made amends, made a compelling case for, made allowances, make headway and make a killing. If you ask like a intermediate level student, do you know the verb make? Of course, I know the verb make. I mean, obviously, I make my bed every day. Uh, and they do. They are familiar with make in some context. But if you think about your, let's say, intermediate or pre-intermediate students, how many of them would you say are familiar with make allowances for, or make a killing, or make headway? Yeah, exactly. So that's my point. When the principle that you can improve your vocabulary by learning familiar words in different combinations is really true. We know the verb make, but there are so many different collocations with make, and for that matter, with make, with keep, with even the word write. The other day, we're looking at expressions with write. There's so many expressions with write that are very advanced. And normally students only focus on like those crazy words that they see on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. So yeah, that's a very important point to get students to think about that. It's possible to improve their vocabulary by focusing on what they already know, right? Exploring what's familiar. Number 4, I mentioned today that students are not very good at guessing. Um, and this is something that course books often focus on, right? So if you're not familiar with the words, look at the text, try to infer the meaning from context. But there is this interesting, I believe that I have this article here to share with you. It says that studies have shown that when you ask students, like you're conducting research and you have a number of different students and you ask them to read a text and try to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, the conclusion is not very positive, because it says that seldom they are able to guess the correct meaning of words in the context. Now, you might be wondering, okay, but why does it happen? They have noticed that for students to be able to successfully guess the meaning of words from context, there is a percentage, a number of words that they should be familiar with in that text. Can you guess? So what is the percentage? Like if you think about the word has 100, the text has 100 words. What is the percentage of the words they should be familiar so they can guess like successfully? 60%, 70%. Oh yeah, I can see here. 80 to 90%. Gabi says 70 to 8, 80, 90. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's very realistic. But it's a bit higher. Research shows that it's from 95% to 98% of the words. And this is very frustrating, right? When you are a teacher and you read this, because you're like, okay, so that's pretty much like all the words from the text. And the other day I tried something with a group of teachers. Yes, Leticia, I feel you. That I would like to try with you today. Um, can you see an extract from a news report? Yeah, okay. To give you some context, this extract was taken from this news report here. Global research, US spends travel from Brazil as schools reopen parts of Australia. You can see 2 paragraphs here, right? You have 90% of the words are here. I believe that if you consider these 90% of the words that you have, I'm pretty sure you are familiar with 98% of them, maybe all. But I would like you to try to see if you can guess the meaning of the words that I'm hiding from you. So for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I wrote apple. You don't have the word. Let's say that if you were students, like real students, these words that are the apple words here are the ones that you don't know. They're unknown. So what do you have to do? Try to guess the meaning of the words from context. Okay, take a minute, read it, see if you can come up with the words here to replace apple. Have you finished reading it? How did it go? Was it easy for you to infer? Kinda. Juliana says yes, difficult. For the first apple, what do you have? Okay, I can see your current. Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting. Two people have current health. Current. Okay, interesting. So was it because of the collocation? Like a current situation? You thought about, okay. For the second apple, you probably have a verb, don't you? For number two. Okay, recover. Oh, because of the preposition from, recover, recover from, recover. Your teachers, right? So you know your prepositions. Recover from. Okay. Three, outbreak, pandemic, pandemic. Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Declare. Uh-huh. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and show you. Is that okay? You have probably, as you're reading, you've probably taking notes. So when I show you, you can check. Can you see the words that complete the text? Yes. What about your glasses? How close were they? Judging by your face, it's not very close, right? You're like, no, far away. Yes. So that's my point. Even though you have, uh, I need a Rivotril, even though you have a great vocabulary knowledge, you see, it's not easy to guess. So if you don't know the words and you have to use the context to help you, and think about it, we as teachers, we have uh, an advantage. I mean, not just because we're teachers, but we know our grammar really well, right? So you look at a gap and you can tell, do we need a noun here? Do we need an adjective? Do we need an adverb? Do we need a verb? Some students don't have this language awareness that by looking at a gap, they can tell the part of speech they need, noun, adjective, adverb, or verb. And even though we have this knowledge, it's still challenging. For example, I believe that for the second gap, most of you went with recover because of the preposition from, and it's actually emerge. Um, the fourth one, Japan was expected to lift a state of emergency. Uh, some teachers, I've done this before. Some teachers went with like the opposite direction. So instead of lifting, they went with the idea of like, closing it, stopping it. My point here is it's not easy to guess, um, neither for students nor for us, right? It's challenging. That's why they say that it's much better to focus on vocabulary development than trying to get students to keep taking it. Of course, that at the beginning, as they haven't developed their vocabulary yet, this is an important skill, right? To make the most of the context so then you can understand what you don't know. But it's something that is like a strategy that works at the beginning, but it shouldn't be something that they're going to keep relying on forever. They should develop their vocabulary. The more words they know, the better. Number five. Number five is about using tools to help us, especially when you're planning lessons. Before I show you one that I select for today's webinar, I'd like to ask you here in the chat, do you use any vocabulary tools either when you're planning lessons, when you're teaching? Quizlet, Scale, Wordwall, definitely. Uh-huh. Love it. Okay, most people use word wall, flashcards. So from what I can see here, most of the tools you use is to teach vocabulary, so students can practice vocabulary. Okay, great. I have something different here. I have something you can use while you're planning your lessons. So let's say that you have found a text and you want to, and of course you can use your intuition here, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using something that can help you make more informed decisions. Let's put it this way. You have a text and then you're not sure, for example, if your students are going to struggle with this text. Because as you know, some words are like labeled, right? This is a C1 level word, this is a C2 level word, this is a more advanced word. Oxford has a tool called Oxford Text Checker. I use this one pretty much every month. I used to use it even more often. You have the link here. When I share with you the presentation, all you need to do is to click, and then you're going to have access to it. It's 100% free. So all you need to do is you get your text. So I got this one from my book. You get your text, you copy it, and then you go to Oxford Text Checker and you paste it. That's it, as simple as that. And then once you click on check text, Oxford Text Checker, is it checker or checker, is going to analyze all the words from the text and label the words according to the level they belong to in the Common European Framework. In other words, if the words are A1, A2, B1, B2, or C1, they don't have C2 yet. They only have from A1 to C1. So as you can see here, they have different colors. The words in blue, which level are they? A1, right?
A1.
Exactly. So the ones in blue are A1, the ones in red, A2, orange, I believe it's orange, B1, green, B2, and purple, C1. I can only see one disadvantage to this tool. It only focuses on isolated words, not collocations. So it doesn't have, let's say, the technology to analyze, for example, collocations. It will only focus on words in isolation. And some words, for example, words at C2 level of proficiency are not going to be labeled. Proper nouns, it's not able to, of course, because if you're talking about names, for example, you don't have names that belong to the Common European Framework, right? But it really helps you, like, because visually you can see where most of the words belong to, if they are A1, A2. For example, you can only select, you don't have to, here I have selected all of them, right? But you can only select one level. For example, if you select B2 or C1, so you can see all the words in green and purple that are at B2 and C1 level of proficiency. So in a way, it helps you to better assess if that text is, let's say, appropriate for your students. So it can help you make this decision. Was anybody here already familiar with this tool? Something that you frequently use? Nope. No. Pamela, yes. Don't frequently. Uh-huh. Great. So where's Pamela? Pamela, do you often use it like when you were choosing texts to use with your students? Is that the purpose you use it for? Yes. Mm-hmm. ChatGPT, yeah, for sure. So yeah, this is a great tool for you to have an idea of the where most of the words are in terms of their level of proficiency. But then an important reminder is that it's not just a question when we're choosing text, especially authentic text to work with students, it's not just a question of analyzing words, right? We also have to take into account the ideas that that text introduces, because if they're very complex ideas, even if they have simple words, students may still struggle. So we need to think about both the ideas that the text introduce and develop and uh, discuss, as well as the words that have been used to express those ideas. And our last principle is using decision-making tasks. As the name suggests, the idea of using decision tasks is, if you're using a course book, you may feel that the activities, the tasks, or let me put it in a different way, the number of opportunities that your students are going to have to use like the new vocabulary is very limited, is very restricted. So you believe you should supplement that to provide them with more opportunities. Now, how can you do that? Of course, there are hundreds of ways to do that. But the idea of using decision-making tasks is to create tasks that students are going to have to make decisions about the words. Why is it so important? Thornbury makes a very good point about this idea of engaging with the new language. He says that there is a greater likelihood of a word being integrated into our mental lexicon if many decisions have been made about it. So you engage with the new word once, you engage with the new word twice. When I say engage, it's not just about exposing students, because exposing can be very receptive, right? But engaging in the sense that I'm going to be doing something with the new words, with the new language. And how do I do that? I often use course books to get my ideas from, but I'm not going to use a course book today. I'm going to use something authentic. Once I was reading this text, this has nothing to do with like course books or whatever. I was just reading for fun. And while reading, I noticed that in this article, there were many adjectives used to describe behavior and personality. So take a look. You have ruthless, nice, deceitful, aggressive, generous, trustworthy, hawkish, disagreeable, dominant, aggressive, and communal. Okay. As teachers are always looking for stuff to use with students, right? So immediately I thought, okay, this is a nice text to use with students to work on vocabulary, to talk about behavior and personality. I didn't have any exercise because this is not a course book. Okay, so I'm going to have to create my own exercises. So to cut a long story short, I created an exercise to get them to discuss, and then the topic of the text, of course, activate their previous knowledge. Then there were comprehension questions, but I'm going to go straight to the vocabulary part, so to save time. So once they read the text and answered the comprehension questions, I asked them to do the following. Okay, I'm going to design 4 activities for them to engage with the new language, with the new vocabulary. Activity number 1, very simple. I said, okay, I'd like you to go over the text again and find, you see, I didn't give it to them. I didn't spoon feed. Oh, these are the words. No, you find the words. So find 10 adjectives that describe personality and behavior in the text. This was the first decision-making task. Because think about it, there was a decision to be made here, right? This text has many words. I only wanted them to focus on adjectives to describe personality and behavior. So they read it and identify the words. So this was the first one. Once they've done that, I asked them to, okay, so now we're going to focus on 6 of those 10 adjectives. Because as I used this, I forgot to mention the level. As I used this with a C1 level group, I didn't focus on generous, even though it was one of the words, but of course they know generous. So I decided to focus on 6: ruthless, deceitful, trustworthy, hawkish, disagreeable, and communal. So the second task was, okay, now that you have identified the 10 words, we're going to focus on 6. I'd like you to match with the definitions. Very simple task, right? But that's a decision to be made here, because if they're not familiar with hawkish, they're going to have to use the context and also by exclusion because some of these words they were more familiar with. The third task was, okay, now that you are familiar with the meaning of these words, I would like you to choose a word that combines with all the three words from the group. So what am I focusing on here? Helping them develop their knowledge of collocations. Does it make sense? Because you have politician knows leadership. One of these 6 words here, they collocate with all the 3 words from the group. Now, which one is it? Similarly, which word collocates with kitchen, space, and facilities? And this was very engaging in the sense that sometimes more than one word can collocate with 1 or 2 words, but not all 3. So they really had to think about it, like which of the words collocate with all the 3 words from the group. Then the last task, I told you there were 4, right? The last task was, okay, now I'd like you to think of 2 people you know. And if they were not comfortable talking about, for example, family or someone close to them, you can think about a character from a book or movie and then choose one adjective that describes this person. So that was the 4th decision they had to make. Think about someone they knew, like either for real or like a fictional character, and think about how these words could describe the person. And the very last activity, they had to tell each other about the person they chose and the adjective they chose to describe them. And then as the other student listened to the description, the other student had to, because this is tricky, right? Sometimes the students talk to each other in pairs and they're not really listening to each other. They're just talking, but they're not really listening. So here I thought, okay, how can I create a purpose for B to listen to A so B could make a decision? So this was a decision I'd like B to make. Listen to A and choose the person who's most similar to you and explain why. Or if they're not similar to you, you can also explain why. But I force B to listen to A in order to make a decision. Now, think about it. How many times have they engaged with the new vocabulary? At least 4, even though we can consider this as the 5th one. Let me test your memory here. Do you recall what was the first activity that they had to make a decision? What was the very first one? Yes, Gabi. Yes, find. First, they had to find the 10 adjectives. What was the second decision they had to make? Match. Words with their definitions. Okay, that's what the second. Meaning, that's right, Anna. The third. Collocations. Yes, to match the word with with the group, keeping in mind that they need a word that collocates with all 3. And the 4th one? Yes, it's about the description. Choose a person and think about the words that could describe that person. Yes, that's it. Now, if you think about these 4 activities, are they revolutionary? Of course not. There's no break. No, yeah, let's be honest. There's nothing revolutionary here. These are activities that you can find in course books. What I did, like in a very simple way was to provide them with 4 different opportunities to engage with the new language, hoping that, now we go back to Thornbury, right? There is a greater likelihood of new words being integrated into your mental lexicon if you make many decisions about it. I've memorized that, God. So yes, so that's the whole idea. But all the activities were taken from course books. So matching, choosing, there's nothing, absolutely nothing revolutionary here. So when I'm supplementing the course book that I use, I always thinking about, okay, so there's one exercise after the text focus on vocabulary. That's not enough, not at all. How can I supplement it? Creating decision-making tasks. What kind of decisions? Finding, choosing, selecting. There is one activity I haven't included here, but I also like to use, which is to rank. ask students, for example, to rank something, to make a decision like from the most challenging to the least one, or from the most probable to the least probable. And then they have to take many things into account, right? Because ranking is not easy. You have to think about why you're prioritizing something over something else. But that's the idea. Let me test your memory. So we have seen 6 different strategies today. They're all incomplete here, and hopefully you're going to be able to complete all of them because you have great memory. Do you remember what the first one was about? Yes. Yes, Lou. Should be dedicated to vocabulary teaching. That's it, Mariana. Number 2? Yes, Stella, not enough. Got it. 3? Yes, it's not just learning new words. Did you take notes, or you can remember this everything from memory here? Notes, that's fine. 4? To guess or not to guess, yes. 5? I took notes, of course. Use vocabulary tools. And the last one? Decision-making tasks. Right. One last question. I know that you have to go, but one last question. Which of these 6 are you going to try and use more often? Or you intend all? The last one. 6, 6. Oh, we have a winner, huh? No, number 1 is also a great competitor. 1. 6. 6. Okay. 1 and 3. Great. So this is the instruction in our course. This class was handed. Oh, good to know, Mariana. So these are the references. You don't have to take note about the reference. I'll be sharing with you the recording and also the presentation, so you can have all the references here in case you want to check.